Hello and welcome to this webinar where we will be exploring the assessment arrangements for ESOL Skills for Life in 2021.
Firstly, it's important to be clear from the outset that the arrangements in place for this year are very different from those that operated last summer. You may recall that all normal assessments and exams for ESOL, functional skills and various other qualifications were halted for several months last year, with all of the candidates due to complete during that period instead receiving a calculated result. There's no wholesale cancellation of exams this year other than for some very specific types of qualifications such as GCSE, and within the arena of vocational and technical qualifications there is much more of a mixed picture. Nevertheless, the UK government has directed Ofqual, the qualifications regulator in England, to produce a new temporary regulatory framework that will underpin the awarding of all vocational and technical qualifications, along with what are termed other general qualifications such as ESOL. This new framework, with the catchy title Vocational Contingency Regulatory Framework, or VCRF, will be in place until the 31st of August 2021. Basically, what the VCRF does is enable awarding organisations to vary the assessment requirements for some qualifications in certain quite carefully defined circumstances. Finally, it's worth just clarifying, especially because our ESOL Skills for Life qualifications are regulated in Northern Ireland and Wales as well as England, that Ofqual has effectively acted as the lead regulator here, and the VCRF arrangements apply across all three jurisdictions. It is a different story for other qualifications such as essential skills that are unique to either Northern Ireland or Wales, or whether they are regulated entirely by either SAEA or Qualifications Wales, although we are of course publishing separate information and will be holding briefings in the coming days for colleagues involved in the delivery of these qualifications.
So, the VCRF has placed qualifications into different categories according to their purpose. For comparison purposes, GCSE and GCE are also included on this slide in purple. The only City and Girls qualification that fits in that box is the Extended Project. Within VCRF, there are three main categories. B1 includes qualifications that are considered similar in structure to GCSE and A-levels. For example, they have fixed date exams and are typically delivered over a whole academic year. It includes our technicals along with things like Level 3 Core Maths. Category A broadly includes occupational and licensed practice qualifications, and it's where there's often not much scope to change the assessment approach without undermining its whole purpose. ESOL sits within the third category known as B2. These tend to be qualifications with a more flexible assessment model than GCSE, for example where it's generally available on demand and year-round, rather than being just one or two assessment opportunities in each academic year. Functional skills is also part of this category. The presumption behind B2 is that normality should be preserved as far as possible, but that there might be need to be alternatives available for particular learners or circumstances. Ofqual has published this infographic. There's a link to it on this slide. It helps to explain a little bit more about the three categories and the assumption behind them. It's framed in such a way that it can be shared with learners. And as you can see, ESOL is in the middle column here.
So let's look a little bit more at the arrangements as they apply to ESOL Skills for Life. As we indicated before, these qualifications are within category B2. The default position is that normal assessment arrangements should remain available and should be the preferred means by which candidates achieve these qualifications. All of our live assignments therefore remain available, with the assessment documents available to download as usual from the 4692 qualification documents page. The multiple choice tests for reading at level 1 and level 2 likewise remain available to book and take, both on paper and on screen. There might be a need to make use of the adaptations that have been put in place for this year, for example the potential for candidates to complete assessments remotely. So each of these options should be explored carefully. And only then, and also only if there is a time-critical need to complete, rather than delaying until normal assessments become possible again, can the alternative, known as Teacher Assessed Grades or TAG, be considered.
So bearing in mind that normal assessment should continue as far as possible, with all the usual assignment and exam-based assessments for these qualifications remaining available, there might be a need for some creative thinking about how this could be done. We have taken some steps to accommodate more flexible and varied approaches, particularly allowing assessments to be completed remotely where it's feasible to do so. In the case of speaking and listening, we've published some quite detailed guidance, but it's also potentially possible to have candidates complete the reading and writing assessment activities remotely. There's more detailed guidance on what's possible, along with the information about the notification process, in the adaptations document covering ESOL Skills for Life. You'll find this on the COVID-19 web pages alongside the various adaptation documents in operation for this academic year. You'll need to look for the one marked ESOL. The adaptations document has a green cover. We are still considering other possible adaptations that might be allowable, without compromising the integrity and purpose of these assessments. So please do keep checking to ensure you're working from the latest version of this document. The arrangements for reading at levels 1 and 2 are different from the rest of the ESOL suite of qualifications, since these are assessed by an externally set marked multiple choice test. Remote assessment isn't therefore applicable here. Although because we do make these tests available on screen via the Evolve system, it is possible to use the new interim test at home remote invigilation system. Test at home does involve an initial approval process, and we're conscious it won't suit everyone, but it is something to consider. Outside of any formal adaptations, it may also be worth considering other possible changes, such as the venues being used to carry out assessments, and whether there are other changes that could be made locally to facilitate assessments. The pinch points and challenges may well be different for each mode. For example, discussion activities for speaking and listening might be relatively easy to conduct using Teams or Zoom. So it's important to work through what the best course of action might be. Are there changes to the order in which modes might be assessed, or would it make sense to delay the assessment until it's easier to accommodate learners? Do bear in mind that TAG is only available as a possible remedy once all other options have been explored and exhausted.
Again, to be clear, teacher assessed grades or TAGs are not the same as the process we saw last year, where all normal assessments were cancelled and centres were asked to predict the outcome if those assessments had gone ahead. TAG is based on evidence of the learner's ability to pass the assessment now, and you will see the term assessment ready used in some of the supporting guidance. As we've indicated, TAG won't be possible for all learners. It's a fallback solution for individual learners who genuinely can't access the normal assessments at the moment and cannot wait until such a time as they can.
Here's where you can find the latest information about the TAG process. You'll also find the slides from this webinar session once we've uploaded them. There is a more detailed guidance document that will walk through the whole TAG application and submission process. That document has a blue cover.
Teacher assessed grades, or TAGs, are available for ESOL as a last resort, where a centre can demonstrate for individual learners who are assessment ready, where it is not possible to delay the assessment, it is not possible to deliver the assessment face-to-face, and it is not possible to deliver the assessment remotely. Of course, any assessments that take place should be run in accordance with relevant public health regulations and guidance. For example, the Department for Education in England has published guidance which outlines how to run assessments in line with Public Health England guidance.
This diagram might help illustrate the decision-making process that needs to be worked through before determining whether a learner may be eligible for a tag. Do bear in mind that they will need to have been registered for the qualification, although of course the ESOL Skills for Life suite has a single qualification number 4692-01, which covers all 15 single mode qualifications across all 5 levels. So there's no need to register separately for reading, writing, etc., or if the learner is progressing through the levels. This diagram appears as an appendix within the tag guidance document for ESOL.
The first step is to identify which of your learners may be eligible for a tag. This handy bullet point list sets out all of the conditions which need to be met in order to apply for a learner to be considered for a tag. They firstly need to be registered for the ESOL Skills for Life suite of qualifications with Sitting Guilds, but do bear in mind that anyone registered for the 469201 under that number has access to all 15 single mode awards, so they don't for example need to be re-registered for each individual qualification. And likewise, anyone registered for 469202 has access to the combined certificates at all 5 levels. As well as being registered, they also need to be assessment ready. You'll see that term appearing a lot throughout all of the documentation. You need to have established that they are unable to access assessment either face-to-face or remotely, and it also there also needs to be a reason why it's not possible to delay the assessment. For example, because the result is required for progression, or that any delay might impact on their ability to progress elsewhere. Crucially, also, the centre must have evidence that a tutor can use to form the basis of their tag judgment. As we said, there is a tag guidance document that sets out these requirements more fully. But one final point that also is perhaps worth bearing in mind, it's not mentioned directly on this slide, but it's worth adding that eligibility for tag might well in some cases stem from learners having already completed their course and no longer being available to return for their assessment, although of course that also relies on there being relevant evidence available to support a tag judgment.
In recognition that last year's CAG process was a once-only opportunity for submission, this year the tag process has been developed to allow a number of windows for centres to apply to submit a tag for their learners. The first window for centres to submit an eligibility booking will run from the 19th to the 23rd of April, with a further 2 application opportunities later in April and in May. These dates are available from the COVID-19 ESOL page. Once centres have completed step 1 and identified the learners that they think are eligible for a tag, step 2 will be to submit individual learners for consideration for eligibility through Walled Garden, which has been updated to show an eligibility booking tab. This submission will be reviewed by our quality team, and any actions or decisions will be seen against the submission. A guidance document covering this process will be uploaded to join the other support materials on the COVID page.
Once all the relevant learners have been identified and submitted through Walled Garden, the centre must complete and submit an eligibility rationale form, which will support the quality team's decision-making process. This form is available on the ESOL COVID-19 page of the website. This document is an overarching rationale for the whole group of learners that you have submitted in Walled Garden, and the details you give in this form will be key as to whether a tag will be allowed for individuals. So the more detailed information you can give, the better we can support you with your request, and it will reduce the possibility that we need to come back to you for more information.
In order to make tag judgments, centres will need to collect evidence for each learner that they are proposing a tag for in order to support those decisions. We haven't deliberately mandated the type of evidence that must be used, but we have tried to give guidance about the range of possible types of evidence that could be considered. For example, completed assignments or tests, any formative or practice exam assessment results, any coursework, homework, or perhaps evidence gathered from the workplace, or relevant evidence that has been gathered to support attainment against other qualifications, or indeed other records of learner performance over the course of study. There isn't one single right answer to the question, what evidence can we use? There are a number of things that you may be able to call upon, but what we have sought to do here is give guidance on the sorts of things that you might wish to look at in the course of being able to support your judgments. The crucial point in all cases is that the centre must be confident that the evidence being put forward is authentic and current, and also crucially that it can be called upon and reviewed for quality assurance purposes.
Centres will need to have a clear IQA process which should cover all staff involved in the tag process having a common understanding of the relevant assessment criteria for the mode level being considered, as well as being familiar with the adult literacy standards and ESOL curriculum, since these underpin all of these qualifications performance expectations. Supporting consistent and valid decisions, centres will need to carry out standardisation activities to ensure the validity of the evidence. Authenticity of the learner's work is important, and centres need to be confident that this is the case. It is useful to understand the centre's assessment data from previous years to get a feel for the performance levels. It is important that all tag grades are reviewed and signed off by the head of centre as part of the submission process. City and Guilds will review these internal quality assurance processes as part of their quality assurance monitoring.
Once our quality team have confirmed that learners are eligible for a tag submission, these decisions will need to be added to the walled garden. Again, we have a number of windows for these submission which follow on from the eligibility application process. Just to note, you will not be submitting the evidence to City and Guilds here. It needs to be retained in the centre so that it's available for review by the quality and assessment teams on request.
As the eligibility and tag submissions are taking place in Windows, we are also have a series of dates for releasing results at the end of each of those windows in line with the table shown here. So you will see that the first sort of batch are due to be released no later than the 18th of June, that second batch towards the end of July, and then the third window, the third sort of sitting if you like, is towards the end of August. And here we've brought kind of all of the information together and the timelines for all three windows, and it's only really when you piece this together that you can kind of see the bigger sort of picture, in the sense that you can see that, for example, the second and third eligibility windows open as soon as the previous one has closed. So for example, for assessment window 1, we're opening the eligibility window on the 19th of April, closing that on the 23rd of April, and then from the 24th of April onwards is the beginning of the eligibility window for the second assessment window. That closes towards the end of May, and obviously then immediately after that the third window will kick in. So you kind of see, obviously there's a sequence of dates relating to each window, but we've deliberately set this in such a way that there isn't a kind of a gap between the at least not a gap between the eligibility windows for each submission.
We have given you a lot of information here, and there will be further guidance documents for you to get your teeth into. But if you have any questions about the tag process, please email the quality team at fs.quality@cityandguilds.com. Don't worry about the title of the email, as the process for functional skills and ESOL is similar. They will use the same inbox. For general inquiries, they can go through our customer services team.
We will be using the questions which were asked in the live webinar to compile a set of FAQs, which we will make available on the ESOL COVID-19 page. We will be updating this regularly to reflect the questions that are being asked. Thank you for joining us for this recording, which we hope you found useful.